And I want to speak to the legalization versus decriminalization, because I feel like when I hear it in conversation, like people kind of get confused. Like, no, it's not legal. When we say decriminalize, it means we're just cutting the funding that would put you in jail.
Right. Yeah. So decriminalization and legalization are kind of two different models. The way that we work this on the city level, and the reason that we have to do this on the city level is because, and you may or may not be dealing with this in Arizona. I'm not sure. I know other places they have this home rule. Some places don't have home rule. Basically, what that means is that some cities can't change the law and be in conflict with state
Mm-hmm.
law. So how do we work
Mm-hmm.
around that?
Yeah.
So the way that we work around it with the decriminalized nature resolution so far is that we deprioritize. So it's making this amongst the lowest law enforcement priority. Basically, if somebody was jaywalking, that would be, as much of an issue, which never gets addressed anyway, than would be if you had mushrooms on you. And then the second thing we do is basically
Mm-hmm.
like um, now I don't want to say defunding because that's such a trigger word now, but a reallocation of funding
Mm-hmm.
away from investigation, persecution, and arrest. So basically, it takes away any resources that people can use for investigating, persecuting, and or arresting people for entheogens, and that gives kind of the teeth to the
Mm-hmm.
deprioritization. So basically, what we're doing on the city level is a de facto decriminalization, where it's a deprioritization and a defunding, which then would be the equivalent. And what the power of the city has is to control the purse strings for their city. They say, hey, we have our
Mm-hmm.
budget. This is what our budget can do. We don't want to waste any money on arresting people for this because it's not worth our time or our energy or our resources. So basically, on the city level, that allows them to have the power over what happens locally. Now, this changes again when you have to go to the county, which would be the sheriff or the state or the federal. But even with cannabis, it's still illegal federally. But obviously, states have no problem selling, cannabis all over the place. So it's about building a movement of power from the grassroots up, and then establishing those communities, because I think on the other side of that is then creating those support structures, right? So, okay, if we
Mm-hmm.
were to do a statewide decriminalization measure, but you don't necessarily have communities in this town, or this town, then if somebody has a challenging or difficult experience, which does happen, I mean, we're still working through this, we're still figuring out
Mm-hmm.
how to rebuild culture around this. Then they have some support there, or
Mm-hmm.
they might not have support if they didn't have that support structure. So by doing this on a city level, we're actually able to help build that support structure. I do a lot of trainings and workshops with folks that are in these different cities to help. How do we do an integration circle? How do we put together events? All these different types of things, so that there can be some local infrastructure there, which then would lead to the go local as well. But on this level, we're just looking at decriminalization and the support structure. Now, legalization, on the other hand, is more of a licensure regulatory framework, and oftentimes, like I said, gets really expensive and can lead to $5,000 retreat center that nobody can pay for anyway,
Mm-hmm.
or particular
Mm-hmm.
setting that is maybe oppressive for many different communities. Not everyone really vibes with the therapeutic setting, or the therapeutic paradigm even. And so how can we find other
Mm-hmm.
ways that can work with folks, that they can actually engage in these practices without having to have the potential hypersuggestibility of these experiences affect the experience. And so if we do this locally, if
Mm-hmm.
we have opportunities for people to, have a culturally relevant setting, I think that'd be really critical. Now, the legalization model, though, or the medicalization or the clinicalization model, unfortunately goes in that other
Mm-hmm.
direction. And um, so what we're trying to do is to, know that that's going to happen down the road, more than likely, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that
Mm-hmm.
the venture capital companies that are trying to jump in on this are really too familiar with this work either. Like they think, oh, this is going to be another cannabis thing where people are going to be coming in a dispensary and buying tons of cannabis every day, and da da da. It's like, people are like, oh, I have one experience a year, maybe two a year. It's not something that I'm doing all the time, because if you have a big experience, then usually you need some time to like sit and let it work through you and all that kind of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, microdosing is a little bit
Mm-hmm.
of a different scenario, but again, microdosing is such a small dose that you're not really having a full-on experience. But even that, it's a small number. It's not something that these companies are going to make billions of dollars on necessarily, but they like to think they are. So we'll see how that goes. But our model, we talked about this right at the beginning, was like, okay, knowing that that's coming down the line, what can we do, since we can't stop it? We don't have the billions of dollars to stop that. What can we do to help alleviate that? And I think the way to do that is to teach people
Mm-hmm.
about growing, is to make it really abundant, because then if everyone has access to their own, then how is those big companies going to monopolize, the industry, so to speak? Everyone's like, oh yeah, that's great that you're selling, these there for X amount of dollars, and I have to get 15 licenses to do it, but I also have my own grown in my backyard, and thank you, I'll take those, you know. So I think that the two models will kind of happen. Our focus really is on decriminalization, or kind of this go local model. On the state level, we would like to do something like descheduling, or exempting from the Controlled Substances Act, because what that's doing is basically saying we don't need to create these huge regulation frameworks for something that shouldn't be illegal in the first place. So let's just, we hear a lot about let's reschedule, but what that means, every time you reschedule, it doesn't take it away from being illegal. It just means that now the medical industry has control over it, right? You go from Schedule 1, which has no medical value, to Schedule 2. Now you can prescribe it. Schedule 3, Schedule 4, Schedule 5, those are prescription drugs, so to speak, right? They're not people medicines, so to speak. So if we can just deschedule, meaning getting it off of the Controlled Substances Act or exempt it from the Controlled Substances Act, then we don't have to worry about all those regulations, and just let people grow their own like they would tomatoes or corn or anything like that.